actually completed the tax training. So we're going to get ready to go back into our TaxSlayer on here. And so this is that link and learn on there, but it is not, you're not going to the account portion where you had to take your ethics as well as your intake. You're going to go to that link and learn, and we're going to click on the practice lab under the quick links. So I am going to launch mine. So you'll see in my screen, it is the link and learn certification. And we're going to go to the quick labs, the quick links, and clicking on our practice lab. And I'm just going to give you a few minutes to get this up if you so desire. I know some may wish just to look online and complete it later. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes if you need to go and get this up. And this is also being referenced in our publication, the test that retest, that publication 6744. And again, we're wrapping up with our advanced scenario 8. So just seeing a few questions, if we are going to be doing, and I know the panelists will be also responding to it as well, are we going to be doing 100% virtual? That is the primary focus, where we will mainly be doing virtual tax prep. So you, our volunteers, will mainly be just preparing the tax return. On the front end, we kind of were able to cover what our 2021, what this tax season will look like. On the front end, we will have intake specialists. And so the goal, the objective for those intake specialists is to address all questions and concerns that we may have on that intake form before it gets passed on or uploaded in the platform for you, the volunteers, to then prepare the tax return. We have our scan to go. And so that will actually be some of our partner locations in the past, but it is, some of those will be appointment based only, but at those scan to goes, it will just be an employee or a staff member that will be taking those tax documents and just verifying, and then again, scanning those to be uploaded for you to prepare. So we are trying to eliminate the need for you to have to reach out to the volunteer, and just letting our experienced volunteers, should they decide to, be able to communicate with the tax client if need be. But that will definitely be heavily for the site coordinators to reach out to the tax client for some additional information or clarifying information. So the objective first is for our intake, who will be reviewing the intake form, to go over and make sure that we have all the pertinent information and asking all the questions. Okay, so if you're able to go into that, again, that link and learn, and under the quick links, you were able to do your the practice lab. Don't forget, we're going to enter in our universal password first. And so that is the Train Pro Web, and that is all capital letters. So you have to enter in your universal password first. So that's Train Pro Web, all in caps. And then it allows us to enter in the username that we created, as well as that 15-character password. And then after signing in, again, going to the banner, go to Practice Lab, the area. If you're wanting some additional practice, you will have that, because you will have, in the advanced scenario, the test, there are 3 scenarios that you have to input into the Practice Lab. Scenarios 6, 7, and 8 have to be input in Practice Lab in order for you to take the test. If you want some additional practice other than that, you can also go down to the section 4 and take some practice returns as well. Or also go in, I believe, section 6 if you want some additional practice. So we're going to click on go to the practice area. And because we've already started on the Richard Roosevelt, we are not going to start a new tax return. We have already started on his tax return. So we have to go into our client search, and that's where we will go and find our return. So as a volunteers, you will only be able to see the returns that you have started on there. You will not be able to see any returns other than your own. So there's a few that I have actually worked on. So I'm going to go and find a Richard Roosevelt. So I'm going to hit select to go back to this tax return. And again, so on day 1, we actually already input all the income information on there. So we've entered in W-2 income, the distribution from his IRA. We've entered unemployment compensation. We've entered in business income, the income from the 1099 NEC, as well as the cash income received, in addition to the expenses. And then we also entered in the cancellation of debt. We've entered that form in. And then we also entered in at the very beginning, we entered in the stimulus. So the workbook, it stated that he had received the first stimulus. So we did enter in that information. The stimulus, it is a that's the recovery credit on there. So it is not classified as income, but we input that information. So for individuals that did not receive the full stimulus or receive it at all, they are getting it by filing a 2020 tax return. So picking up off where we left, again, I have mentioned that we did enter in all of his income. So we continue from the income going to the next screens. So when it talks about deductions, and adjustments, there were no adjustments that we had to factor in. Because he has business income, TaxSlayer has already factored in the self-employment tax, half of that self-employment tax that he is able to deduct. So we will see that when we look at the Form 1040. Also, the scenario mentioned that he will not itemize. So TaxSlayer has also factored in the standard deduction for Richard on there. So we do not have to worry about inputting that information. And because the standard deduction has doubled, we will very rarely have individuals that will be able to itemize on there. And some good things to look at if a person can itemize, I like to look at charitable contribution amount as well as mortgage and property taxes on there. If you think those three are going to be more than the standard deduction, then you can look into itemizing. We also talked about the standard deduction. If an individual did a charitable contribution of $300 or up to $300, that can be added to the tax return in addition to the standard deduction. We do not have to see the documentation, but they will need documentation just in case they get audited by the IRS. There were no additional credits that we needed to factor in because TaxSlayer, it has already factored in the ones that he's able to claim, which is the credit for other dependent on there. So we are good to go to the next slide. So then we have our other taxes. Again, so by inputting the information into the Schedule C for his business income and expenses, again, the software has already calculated the self-employment tax for us. So we will be able to see that when we get to that screen. So the other one that we want to look at that we talked about is we mentioned that he took a early distribution. And so he took that early distribution because he was out of work regarded to the COVID-19. And he did not repay this distribution by the due date of his tax return. So because he is a qualified individual, he does not have to pay that 10% penalty related to the distribution. So what we need to do is we need to remove that. You remember on the 1099-R in box 7, it had a code 1, which automatically prompts the TaxSlayer to add that 10% penalty. So in order to move that, we need to click on Tax on Early Distribution. We need to click on Begin. This is related to that form 5329 that will populate. And we need to type in the amount. So we're going to go to that second box, the early distributions that are not subject. So it is the full $1,000 distribution that he received. And selecting the reason for exemption, we need to select other. This is going to remove that $100 tax that he has to pay subject to this amount. So once we enter that in, we're able to then go to continue. And you can see as you're inputting information to the right-hand side, it did change his federal refund amount. So we're going to hit continue. Okay, so we have taken care of our other taxes section. And so we have no other payments or estimates. It did mention that Richard, he does not want a direct deposit. So we're going to hit continue. These miscellaneous forms, we have already taken care of his IRS identification PIN when we started the return at the beginning on there. So it does have a placeholder to enter that IP PIN number at the beginning, but should you forget, it also has it available at the end as we're getting towards the end of completing that tax return. So again, this number has to be input in order for us to electronically file that tax return. So we have entered in the information. So his PIN has been entered. And so then it talks about, did you or your spouse or dependent purchase health insurance via healthcare.gov or the marketplace? And so it did talk about in the scenario that Richard did not have health insurance. So we're going to select no. And at this point, it is stating that our return, it is complete. So typically on this screen, we are able to then go and review the tax return. And so I'm just going to click the View Print Return to generate a PDF to make it easier to see. So this is some additional paperwork. So going to the form 1040. Again, we determined that Richard, he was filing head of household because he is able to claim his mother. And it has his name, the taxpayer's name, as well as Social Security number, address information. For standard deduction, we determined that he was not claimed as a dependent on there, and he doesn't meet the additional amount for the standard deduction based upon he was not blind, also based on his age. It does have listed his mother as a dependent. And so then we go to the income information. We see on line 1, this is the total from the 2 W-2s that were entered in on last class. And then we have on line 4B, this is that IRA distribution that he received. And then we go down to line 8. This is that other income that pulls over from Schedule 1. So I'm going to go to the Schedule 1 quickly. And so Schedule 1, Part 1, the additional income. We see line 3, that is the net business income from Schedule C. So this is the income minus expenses. Gave him a net profit of $3,861. Also, he had unemployment compensation for the 2 months that he was not employed, the $2,800, and then that cancellation of debt for that card on there that he's reporting, has to report as income from that 1099-C. So adding up those 3 income items gives us the $7,436, which rolled to the form 1040, line 8. If we add up all of his income to determine his gross income, total income, it is going to give us $53,086. So where does the line 10A come from? That 273, we're going to go back to that Schedule 1, but we're also going to go and look now at Part 2. Adjustments to income. So I did mention that TaxSlayer is already going to calculate the self-employment tax. And we also talked about in the adjustment section that business workers, individuals that have business income, half of the self-employment tax, they are able to deduct as an adjustment. So this 273, this is half of the self-employment tax. There were no other adjustments to income, so the 273 comes down to line 22, and again, that goes to the form 1040. So that is the line 10A. So no other adjustments. He didn't do any charitable contributions on there. So 273 goes to line 10C. And that's going to reduce his income to line 11, the $52,813. That is his adjusted gross income. So he is taking the standard deduction based on filing head of household, and that is giving him the amount of $18,650. You can also go and look to the far left and see the standard deduction amounts as well based on an individual's filing status. Then on line 13, we have the qualified business income deduction. Again, this is something that TaxSlayer will compute for us. And this is again for those individuals that have business income. So those Schedule C individuals. And again, that was the 20% of qualified business income or of his taxable income. So he's able to do a deduction of $718. If we add his standard deduction and qualified business income deduction, we come up with line 14, which is the $19,368. That amount gets subtracted from his adjusted gross income on line 11 to become $33,445. That is his taxable income. So we would then be using the tax table to determine what is his tax liability, how much tax does he have to pay based on the taxable income number, the 33,445. So going to page 2 of the Form 1040, we see that his tax is $3,729. There were no Part 1 other taxes that he was subject to. So the 3729 comes down to line 18. And then we see line 19, there are some credits that he qualified for. And so this $500 credit is based upon being able to claim his mother on his tax return. So she qualified him for the credit for other dependents. And this is a non-refundable credit, so it's reducing his tax liability. So he doesn't receive any other credits, so that $500 is his total non-refundable credits, and it reduces his liability to line 22. So his new tax liability is $3,229. But now we have to go and look at what about other taxes in Part 2. Well, again, self-employed individuals. Richard was self-employed and he did complete a Schedule C. Again, TaxSlayer will automatically complete the Schedule SE for us. And so he has self-employment tax of $545. Remember, TaxSlayer already computed half of it as an adjustment. So this other tax gets added onto the tax liability of the $3,229. So it's making his total tax on the 2020 tax return $3,774. So this is the amount that he is responsible for. But Richard had some W-2 income and he's already had some federal taxes withheld to help take care of that $3,774. So from his 2 W-2s, he had $4,460 withheld, as well as his IRA distribution and unemployment, he had federal taxes withheld, and those two totaled $480. So total federal taxes he had on line 25D is $4,940. We also show that in the his scenario that he received the first stimulus of the $1,200. He did not receive, it did not mention him receiving the second portion of the $600. So he is able to receive the additional recovery rebate credit of the $600. So the federal taxes withheld, the $4,940 plus the $600, gives him total payments of $5,540. but he had that tax liability on line 24 of the 3774. So we need to reduce that. And so now it shows that he is getting a refund of $1,766. So that's the refund that Richard would be receiving. And again, you'll see down below for the sign here, we do have his IP PIN entered in. So we've covered the return. That would be the quality reviewer, site coordinator that's going over the return with the client. But you still have to complete the return on there. So when you receive the tax documents, you'll be going from the platform. You're going to go into TaxSlayer and enter them. You're going to complete the return all the way through in order for us to review. So you're still going to have to go and hit continue. You can do a double check going over the tax return that you've input the information in. So once you hit continue, we're just wrapping up the tax return. And this is just some warnings on here. We did leave part 2 blank. He did not receive the credit, the second stimulus. And if we needed to double check, we could go back and just verify. So now we're getting ready to select the federal return type. Again, remember, Richard did not provide direct deposit information. He does not want his return, his refund as a direct deposit. He did provide his IP PIN number, so we are able to e-file. So we would be selecting e-file paper check. Typically, an e-file paper check takes about 4 weeks for the tax client to receive their refund. E-file direct deposit, it's about 3 weeks. If a person, we talked about if a person decides that they actually want to opt for paper, they can still do a paper return with direct deposit or just a paper return with a paper check. Standard paper returns take about 6 weeks to process, but we do not know if that will be the same time frame since we are still bouncing back or still in a pandemic. So we're not for sure if it will still be the same 6-week time frame. So for Richard, we're doing e-file paper check. This information will already be generated for us. So you're going to click next. Because we are a no-cost tax preparation center, we do not have to worry or address anything as it relates to the fees. So we're going to hit next. Also, because you are volunteers and we are no cost, you do not have to worry about the third-party designee information. So again, we're able to go and click next. We talked about in day 1 training about the consent to disclose the tax return. This is an optional for our tax clients. They can decide to opt in, which means if they go to another VITA site, VITA participant, and they have opted in, we are able to share tax year information with them. We are able to share their tax information. So the next year, the client would be receiving just their basic information, such as name, address, and they would see their prior year employers to confirm. If they decide to opt out, the next year tax preparation, they would be starting their return from scratch. So we're going to be saying, Richard says, sure, go ahead, share my information. He has signed off on the back of that consent. We're just going to create a PIN for him. And we're going to select today's date. And we're going to hit next. Typically in TaxSlayer, we have within our intake, we do have some additional questions that we do like to ask our clients. So if we do have those, we would ask that you to complete those on our questionnaire. This does allow us to receive some of the funding that we're able to get. And so after we do those questions, we're going to click next. So and then hit save. So we have that information. So you, the tax preparer, you have entered in everything and you're ready for the return to be quality reviewed. So what you're going to go to do in the return transmit status, you're going to click ready for review, and then you're able to hit save and exit the tax return. This will then allow the site coordinator or advanced volunteer to then go in and review that tax return. So we have entered in the information for Richard for his tax return. So the next part, after it is quality reviewed, the site coordinator will then be scheduling an appointment with Richard to go over his tax return via video chat on the platform, or we could then email it and just walk him through it on the platform. And then he is able to electronically sign the tax return as well as electronically receive a copy. So this information is always secure and it's password protected. But we have completed